Hello YouTubes, my name is IceDoggyRat and this is Happy Wars. And more specifically, this is the new special challenge in Happy Wars called Castle Defense. And right away I'm going to be jumping here in a team skill right at the start, because if your teammates call Sacred Song or Cheer or any kind of buff team skill right at the start, you want to be in that, because that's going to help. That, I'd suppose, may save you, but nah, you shouldn't die on wave 1. If you're dying on wave 1, then that ain't going to be able to help you. No amount of tips is going to help you. So, straight from the start, we're going to see here I'm using the Mage class. This is the default Mage, not the newer Zephyr class, because I think for this special challenge, specifically, the Mage works better. And for co-op matches against bots in general, I've never seen the Zephyr as being really useful. I mean, it does have some interesting skills, but I'll give it that. But I just don't see it being that useful against bots, because debuffing and control and everything else the Zephyr's crazy magic does, that just doesn't seem too necessary against bots. But to the point, this is the Castle Defense Special Challenge. I am doing this with only one other teammate, and I wouldn't advise that. If you can, I would definitely try and build a bigger party, because it will help a lot for this. For those of you who haven't played this, you are basically, this is on the Rainbow map, you're basically forced to stay near your own castle, defend it against 9 waves of enemies, and defeat them all within 29 minutes, which is a lot harder than it sounds. Right here you're going to see this meat bonus that's only applicable in this game type. I personally, what I like to do is always spend maybe at least 2 meat right at the start on earning meat faster, because by default you want every 150 XP, and then it goes down to 120 with 1 meat spent, 100 with 1 meat spent, and I think it goes down by 10s and then 5s for a while after that. But to the point, what you're seeing here is me trying to spawn camp with Wind Trap, because that's funny and cheap, but it sort of works. What you definitely want to be doing is, if you can split your team up so that all your aggressive built classes should be defending a lane, maybe 2 people per lane, I suppose that could work, but some lanes may require 1 person, and what you definitely want to be doing is, if an area you're defending has no enemies in it, you definitely want to move into another one. Got to stay mobile, stay aware, and you've got to stop the enemies from building this cannon right here. I've seen a lot of people try and use these cannons to the team's advantage, and it's perfectly possible. If you have a good team, it would be pretty easy to use those cannons and have somebody defend that cannon, and, well, you could probably spawn kill a couple of enemies with that in the earlier waves. I'm not so sure in the later waves when they start spawning right next to those, but for the most part, unless you know for a fact you're definitely going to be able to defend those cannons, I would strongly suggest just trying to do whatever you can to keep the enemies off it. As you are seeing here as a mage, what you would definitely want to be doing is using your B button skills, Lightning Strike and Wind Trap, and those are very helpful for keeping enemies off cannons. Also, the AI aren't too smart when they're on cannons, or when they're building cannons, so you can just set Magic Napalm, run around them all, and then detonate it. You usually get a few good cheap kills right there. Blizzard is also pretty helpful. Blizzard is definitely helpful keeping enemies away from building the cannons. But no matter what you're doing, what class you're using, your main priority should really be on stopping the enemy team from building anything. I mean, ladders aren't so bad as long as you can control the potential aftermath, I suppose, but if the enemy builds a battering ram, you're going to have problems, and you want rid of it right away. But what you've just seen there is, again, more team skills in between waves. If you have any team skills that are useful, you should definitely be calling them in between each wave. We're talking any kind of buff skill, Sacred Song, Chair, or in some cases some offensive skills you can use. It's a good idea to use them in between waves and call them at the start of waves. I would try and avoid lightning arrows though. Lightning arrows isn't really too helpful. I suppose even if you call it right back at the castle gate, I mean, you're not likely to get many kills with lightning arrows. Tornado can be useful, but only if used properly. because for the most part tornadoes are only going to kill enemies on one lane. The only real use for tornado is to sit right back at the castle gate and try and hope enemies run towards the gate and not towards the side. And right here you're seeing the bomb monsters. These invade on wave 3 for the first time. They aren't that dangerous in actual combat, but as the name implies, once you kill these, they're going to explode and they're going to knock you flying. And usually these do quite a lot of damage, these bomb monsters. If you are a warrior, you want to try sticking to abilities with knockback, so smash or the like. And mages, just keep your distance. Clerics, run away. Clerics would have nothing to do with the bomb monsters. Again, on this wave, you're going to see these big Slayer Berserker guys that, well, they really hurt because they're Berserkers. Thankfully, I'm going to get a revive here and straight into Warrior Slayer, who dies. Now, thankfully, because these are Berserkers, they don't have too much HP. They do have quite a lot of damage though, so your best bet is to stay at range from them. But if all else fails, it is perfectly possible, say, as a warrior to kill Warrior Slayer. It's difficult and it's going to hurt, but a bit of teamwork will get you there, especially if you have 1 or 2 good clerics available for revives. Now this guy right here, Attack Proof, he is really tanky. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, but from what I'm aware of with Attack Proof, he is largely immune or takes significantly less damage from warrior and cleric attacks. So I believe mages do their normal damage on him, maybe a bit improved, I don't know that. I'm also not sure if ballistas and the cannons, which you shouldn't have anyway, do increase damage to him. Not 100% sure on that, but those guys need to die pretty quick, as soon as you possibly can. So, enough with the tips for the mage for now. For those of you using clerics for this special challenge, you have 2 to 3 roles, depending on how you want to look at it. As a cleric, you definitely want to hope to get the Dispel ability. If you get Dispel, then you are going to be a great credit to your team. You can run around and keep dispelling all their ladders and other such building materials, and it keeps them out of the castle much easier. But even if you don't get Dispel, you're a cleric. Thank you for playing cleric, and do your best to keep your team alive and healed up, and lots of healing goodness and many other things. Though, it's also possible for clerics to stay on the castle wall as more of a entirely defensive cleric. What you want to do if you're doing that is either you can build a ballista and get on the ballista and try and do some damage with those, which is especially helpful if you have any buffs that support ballistas, say tactical power up, cannon accuracy up, or cannon shots up. Those can actually make killing enemies with a cleric pretty easy. But also, as a cleric, you can stand on the wall or on the ballista spots and heal enemies. Heal enemies? No, you don't want to be doing that. Healing enemies would be very bad. You can you can heal your teammates and revive and such from up on the walls, which is very helpful. And you definitely want to be doing that a lot, because as a cleric you don't really need to be down in the middle of the action. Though the only major downside to that is, of course, that you can't heal teammates that are all right up in the front spawn camping. So it can often be better to be down on the ground as a cleric, but you definitely need to be careful. You don't want to be getting into the combat too much. But, because the problem with that is most of your points from this special challenge are going to come from kills. That much is inevitable, because as long as you make in at least a few waves, you're going to see all the mages and warriors and berserkers with maybe 60, 70 plus kills. A lot of the points coming from kills, so as a cleric, you can often expect to not really get many kills unless you actually geared up enough to be able to actually cause a decent amount of damage to enemies. That isn't really necessary on a cleric, but it certainly can help. Personally, as a cleric, I prefer to just run around being the supportive member of the team, run from fights and lead them into your teammates. Which leads me to another point: if there is a cleric being attacked by enemies and you're not busy, please support the cleric. We cleric users do not like to die, because dead clerics can't heal. That's this funny little rule. And what you're seeing right here is lots of meteors, because this is wave 5, and the Living Dead team will spawn on wave 5. These guys spawn, I think, most waves after 5. But the Living Dead enemies, as a general rule, do not have very much HP, so things with higher attack rates seem to work a bit better on these guys. So we're talking maybe for warriors or berserkers, you've got your spinning blade. Mages can actually get rid of these quite easy. Magic napalm, wind attacks, or lightning attacks can get rid of these guys pretty easy, assuming they don't just juggle you with rush and spam raw until you die. Even for a less than optimally geared cleric, it's still perfectly possible to kill these guys, so clerics, you may want to try and get some points here. But of course, with them being weaker, also comes the risk that they are in greater numbers, and therefore it's much more likely for this to happen. But a bit of an important tip here: if there is even one enemy within your castle or on the castle walls inside it, you can always open the castle gate to get inside and kill the enemy. But you really need to think quickly about doing this, because you need to try and make sure you're not just going to let a lot more enemies in, but if you have nobody else inside to kill the enemies that are already in, then you're going to have to open it anyway. Now, that's wave 5 done. The next wave is going to get a little more hectic, and this is one of the much tougher waves, so you'll have to bear with me here. But first, something that should have been noted early on. At, I think, wave 4, maybe? Somewhere around wave 4, you'll see at the sides of the castle, the enemy have 2 spawn points further back. These were the spawn points I was talking about earlier on, that can prevent you being able to get on the cannons quite easily. You do not want that to happen, because that is bad. It also means you need to pay much more attention to the sides, because a lot of the enemies at the sides of the castles that are spawning there will go straight to the sides and build ladders, try and get in from the sides, trying to sneak in unaware. So you need to be focusing, well, everywhere. You have to really do your best to make sure that you can defend all 5 entry points that the enemy has, because there are 4 ladder spots and of course the battering ram. Though ideally, I think overall it's best if the enemy are coming in through the front door, because it's much more controlled and you can definitely track them in the archway entrance area. It works quite well, especially if you have some Zephyrs with the capture skill. There may be one of a few uses for Zephyrs in this special challenge. Mages with Blizzard are also helpful. Warriors or Berserkers with charge attack. Berserker double spinning blade, it is good for crowd control, but against large groups of enemies you're not likely to last very long. And what you're seeing there is these football players, I guess you could call them, American football players. These guys are pretty tanky, they do a lot of damage, and I'm going to call them sub-bosses, I guess. Much like the big guy on the first couple of waves, called Cypripedium or something overcomplicated, some made-up word probably. I don't know if that's a made-up word, but Cypripedium doesn't really sound like an actual word. I don't know. Back to the point. What you're seeing up there is teammates building ballistas on the castle walls. These, as I mentioned before, can definitely help, but it's hard to know whether you'd be better off on the ballistas or down on the ground helping. It depends on your class, really. And what you're seeing there is something you definitely want to be doing at this point if you can help, if you can manage it. Calling team skills such as Meteor Storm is very helpful at this point, because there are currently 3 of the stone golem enemies in. These all spawn at the same time. Those are the attack-proof enemies from the earlier wave. Without team skills or a lot of powerful team members, you're going to struggle to keep those guys out. You really want to be, I suppose, trying to focus fire them down if you don't have team skills. Just attempt to get multiple teammates on them at once, which definitely helps. And what you're seeing there is a trick that not many people appear to know. As a mage, if you target your lightning strike from inside the castle, you can actually call it over the walls and land it outside. And just a minute ago you may have noticed the announcement that Gatecrasher had arrived. I think he already died before he got to become much of a threat. For those of you that don't know, Gatecrasher is a giant drill, put simply as that. If he reaches your gate, he will destroy it in a single hit. He's fairly slow moving, quite damaging. Your best bet is to attack him from behind and try and absolutely at all costs prevent him from reaching the gate. But what you're seeing here is some smart play. Someone has bunched all three of the attack-proof enemies together, and this is a great time for mages like myself with Lightning Strike to call Lightning Strike down upon the three golem enemies. And that's pretty much that wave done. The main threats there is the chaos that undoubtedly ensues once the golems and Gatecrasher arrive, because those are fairly powerful enemies, and you need to be dealing with them as quick as possible. And sadly, what I think is about to happen here is, I believe wave 7 was as far as we reached, because as you're about to see, wave 7 is total chaos. There are lots of enemies, and at this point they have an unbelievable 500% HP, which is crazy. I don't see why they're given this many HP buffs. Maybe this was intended to be some challenge for elite teams of 8 players, I don't know, but I am yet to see anybody reach further than wave 7. I've tried for multiple different tactics, classes, whatever, everything, but there is not much more that can really be done. I would suggest, if you can, just trying to survive the enemies here. There's your biggest problem. I suppose survival is always the objective, but the enemies on this wave have a lot of damage, so mages, if you're using a mage like I am, try and sit back a bit more, maybe even on the walls, call your lightning strikes, maybe just use fireball attacks from a distance. I don't find that wind or lightning magic is much use against these, but as you can see here, we are being completely swarmed within the castle. Also, as you saw there, the cleric's wall skill can be very useful in these situations because, well, they're clerics, and the wall skill keeps the enemies out. But when you've got that many enemies swarming your castle at once, there's really not that much you can do about it other than sit there and die, and well, that's all she wrote. 6 waves destroyed, which isn't a massive amount of points, but this event is pretty tricky. I hope this guide has, well, these tips have helped you to succeed more in castle defense. You're about to see the final scores. I thank you very much for watching. All comments and feedback are appreciated. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you later.